mean, I think that's, to me, was one of the fascinating things, especially in hindsight, when I think about it. It took you a little bit of time. You came from the years at Margiela and then Vuitton, you start Vêtements, so you come with experience. And then those first couple of years at Balenciaga, you and Cedric Charbit, who came a year after you, you know, that you had to probably make some changes structurally and get, you know, but it took a few years before things started to become really clear. I remember, like, one of the things I was going to ask you, actually, I wanted to ask about Cedric and having that partnership of a CEO, because it's always been one of the things that has kind of mattered in fashion. You think of Berger and Saint Laurent, Tom Ford and Domenico De Sole, those kind of where you need two people. And I wondered, because I remember talking to you, I'm diverting a little bit, but I remember talking to you in the summer of 2020. It was June of 2020. We were kind of coming out of lockdown. And you expressed some frustration about what the merchandisers were doing. You were pretty honest about it. And I think, like, you were doing your thing, or the creative team, but then you and Cedric solved that problem by bringing the merchandisers into the design team. And I was going to ask you about that, like, why did that matter, and what was the effect of that? And were there other changes that you and Cedric in those first few years had to make structurally to make things, to create the place where you could get to where Balenciaga got to?
That was a lengthy process, and also because we never worked together before, we first needed this time to get to know each other. That's why it felt like it took some time, because it did take some time for us to understand also each other's maybe strengths and weaknesses as well, and to kind of try to be complementary on that. I think when I talked to you about the merchandising, and, like, you know, anybody who works in a house will tell you, like, any creative will tell you the same thing, because very often with the creative success and the vision comes commercial success, and it kind of feeds the domino effect. You just get merchandising being more involved and tell you, well, this sells, and this the other brand selling this, so maybe we should also do that, a little cork platform, because, you know, and it might go against your aesthetic or your vision, or, you know, from creative point of view. So it often, and I've experienced it earlier, I actually experienced it at Vêtements, I experienced it in a very different way, because I didn't really have to deal with that in my previous jobs, but I've always experienced that, directly or indirectly. Sometimes they would just come to me and say, okay, we need to do a leggings and this and this and this, and everything needs to have big shoulders. But I realized that often it comes from the statistics, and from the, not necessarily always the strategic thinking, and say, okay, this is something we definitely need on the market. Merchandisers are, you know, just also people who base their research on something they read or check with other, you know, brands, what they do. But it somehow didn't fit necessarily with my way of doing things. I mean, I have a point of view. I doubt about it often, and I think it's a good thing. And, you know, I ask people what they think and their opinion, etc. But ultimately, I also kind of make a conclusion about it and think, okay, this makes sense to me. This is what I would buy. This is what I would want to have, or have a desire, because that's what I'm trying to do with product. And often what merchandisers would ask me would not really go with that. You know, it would feel like unauthentic for me to even put that in the collection. I almost felt like I was betraying my own creative personality somehow doing that. So we had a lot of discussions, of course, and there were also good things that were suggested that I wouldn't even have thought about, because, you know, brand grows, and I cannot really think about every product that somebody might want from you. So that is helpful. This exchange is absolutely necessary, I felt. What's really kind of important for me, that it goes through the creative vision. And that's when we made this decision to kind of have the merchandising team I mean, it's all about, it doesn't matter to who they report, but to work together with the studio and with me directly also. It's still like that. Like when I start working on the collection, people who are responsible for different product categories, they come and they're like, okay, we saw you like this shoe. What do you think if we do this and that kind of iteration of that?
It just ends up being better communication of, like, and they see it right there. There's not a break.
And they're smart people who have their understanding of my vision, but also understand the market better than I do. So they're like, how can we diversify what you do in the way that would cover more? Because if you want to grow as a brand, you have to make more products somehow, and you have to talk to more customer. I mean, that's kind of their job, which I just do what I do. I don't think about all of this. It's a collaboration, and it's not always easy. I mean, I won't tell you that it's like, oh, from the first day on it was clear, because I think it's very unusual to do that, but it does pay off because that's what people come for at Balenciaga at the end of the day. When a product doesn't resemble me, the customer doesn't believe it, he doesn't want to have it.
Before you started Vetements and you were at Vuitton, and you've now had some experience, you were at Margiela for quite a while, you understand the luxury business. You're sort of looking at what the luxury business was, can be, the high fashion business, whatever you want to call it. I've always had the impression that you expressed some of your ideas in Vetements about what you thought brands should be and who they should represent. You started showing us that with your casting at Vetements, and which you have done even more so at Balenciaga. But your references were always going to be different because the world, you come from a different place. And I've said this before, I'm like, most of the designers who work in big houses over the last 25, 30 years have come from Western Europe, or they've been Japanese, when I think of the Japanese wave of the 80s and 90s, or they've been Belgian, of that great wave. But you came from a whole, set of circumstances that were different. But I also just wonder too, it's just like your own feelings about the potential for what a high fashion brand could be in the second decade of the new millennium. And that maybe other brands just weren't thinking like that. I think when we see Balenciaga today, I sense the ideas of what somebody really wanted. It takes a while to get there, but I sense that. And I just didn't know that when you were, we're talking roughly between 2013, 2015 before you get hired, you've got the project of Vetements, but whether there were also other things brewing in the back of your mind that you would wondering, or maybe you weren't ready to articulate them, or maybe you weren't sure, but I just wondered about that.
I still have those things brewing, I have to say. It's like, thanks God. And some of them are actually still brewing from back then that I still haven't realized. I think that it depends in which context, you brew them. I mean, it's interesting. You were the first person that ever brought up this thought about like people mostly that we know in the fashion industry that come from the Western culture. And I've never thought about that, actually. After our conversation, I had to think about it and try to analyze what did it do to me that I might see differently. I think it's also maybe about personal experiences, like what clothing means to me, how I try to like hide myself through it, or or show myself through it, or express myself, and how much I suffered through it because of it, actually, because of trying to be different than myself, and then I think those experiences on top of, other cultural aspects definitely, made me see fashion industry from a different point of view. Somehow I always think a bit of like, I'm a bit of a communist at heart, I don't know, somehow, in my approach to it, like I often not criticize, but question a lot of like, I would say the kind of fundamental things about capitalism that I find difficult to live with and keep and be true to my values as well at the same time, in terms of what we do and how much we sell and how much we make and how much, all of that. It's a very conflicting thing for me. Like, I still don't know how to deal with it. Sometimes I get really angry about it. And sometimes I just forget about it and go with the flow because there's things that I cannot change, and c'est la vie. I'm supposed to make a code. I'm not supposed to like.
But I love the fact that you think about that. Because I share your view. I always say that fashion makes me a communist and farming makes me want to be a capitalist.
That's good.
And I felt that long before I started farming. I also thought about. There's something about the whole fashion thing that makes me angry. I love creativity. I put that aside. I've been fortunate to be around a lot of creative designers. But I love the fact that you come from experience that makes you think of things, of the values that are venerated more lately today than in the past, that you have reason to question that because you've come from a different experience. And that somehow works into the Balenciaga story that you've been telling really, I would say, in a very hardcore way in the last 3 to 5 years. So,
I think it's also like there is this part of me that you know, couture, for example, is a good example. That's the part in which I completely forget about all those things. I just want to focus on body and material and silhouette and, you know, making. There is no questioning of any of that really, you know, involved. But the moment I get into ready-to-wear mode, that's where it starts. I'm like, okay, let's, you know, we need to do stuff. Like, we need to be active. We need. I once I think I called myself a fashion activist in some way. So like, I'm not going on the street like with the, you know, I don't say things, but I think through work as well we can do it. I think it's a little bit makes maybe fashion a bit more relevant to me because I kind of have a love and hate relation with this concept of fashion in general. I love it, but at the same time, there's a lot of things that I hate. But it's like a bit like, you know, you can have this kind of thing with your family members. It's also it doesn't mean, but it does push some buttons with me where, and it filters through the work then, yes. But I sometimes wonder, like, I love making a couture dress custom made on someone who, you know, this is such an amazing way of complimenting a person by doing this work for them. But at the same time, I really get angry where I hear some people who know my work, who follow it for years, who love what I do, but cannot even buy it. Yeah. You know, and that's the communist which is, you know, I'm like, I want them to be able to wear what I do, at least like two things, you know. That's a tightrope to walk, especially when you come into the luxury sector, and you know, like you need to stay within it, and that's where I have to kind of, you know, keep my communist